Have you ever been eating your peanut butter jelly sandwich made with Wonder Bread all the while drinking your delicious Coca-Cola? And then you realize there's actually no such thing as peanut butter or jelly. I mean, peanut butter is pretty much only 10% full of peanuts overall. The butter part is really just an idea made up of corn syrup and seed oils. Same thing with the jelly, pretty much. It's mostly just high fructose corn syrup with a little bit of fruit juice. And Coca-Cola? I mean, what even is it? On the surface level, it's just that red bottle that we might associate with certain feelings of temporary happiness and carbonation in our mouths. The more you get into it, the more you start to think, hey, what exactly am I eating here every day? Why are some foods packaged so much differently than others? Why do some foods get labeled as something misleading, but other foods are just given a simple name? There's so many things to consider. I mean, what even is food anyway? Well, in essence, food is really just an idea, just a concept, taking things which are edible and categorizing them. The whole premise of food began with us humans consuming parts of nature. So then, how did the way humans eat become the way it is today? Well, if you go back and look at that peanut butter sandwich you were eating, ask yourself, what is it that I'm really consuming here? The entire narrative of a peanut butter sandwich implies that it's made by spreading peanut butter between two pieces of bread, but how is it spreadable? I mean, it's not like peanuts themselves can just be turned into this kind of consistency. Well, it's due to the fact that it's made with vegetable and seed oils such as soybean oil or canola oil. It's the consistency of these oils which even give peanut butter its name. These oils contain high amounts of something called omega-6 fatty acids. Whenever you consume these acids, your cell membranes accumulate the acids very easily. So the more of these acids you consume in the form of these oils, the more they accumulate in your cell membranes. Why does this matter? Well, your skin, your organs, your brain, all of it is part of the massive collection of cell membranes that make up your very being. Okay, so what? Of course, with any food I eat, it's going to contain compounds that accumulate in my cells. What's the big deal with these omega-6 acids? Well, here's the thing. These fatty acid compounds are very easily oxidized. What exactly is oxidation, though? It's a chemical reaction where some compound loses its atomic structures from some form of stress. This could be a variety of things, such as heat, pressure, light, or things such as this. So for example, if you took a bottle of canola oil and put it in a microwave, it would show signs of oxidation from the heat extremely quickly. So wait, what does that mean? Well, if these fatty acids are accumulated in your cell membranes, then that means in turn that your cells are also just as susceptible to oxidation. So if you go out into the sun, for example, and your cells are full of these acids, then the more acids you have, the more sensitive your skin is going to be to the radiation and the heat of the sun. Wow, the effects of the foods I eat run deeper than I thought, huh? Well, it's not like I eat too much of these oils, right? Is what you might say after eating a salad with some ranch, maybe a donut, maybe some french fries. These seed oils creep into almost everything in the modern food world. Hell, even baby formula brands are literally required by the FDA to contain some kind of seed oils in their formula. This is literally what we're feeding babies. Want to go even deeper? Well, here's one example, canola oil. What really is it? Well, it starts with extracting the oil from a rapeseed plant. These plants have to be specially bred in order to decrease the high amounts of toxins within them. The most compelling part? It's then washed with a compound called hexane, which is literally a known neurological toxin. It's quite literally damaging to your brain function. I mean, just imagine what kind of psychological effects that may have on whoever consumes the oil. And this shit is in everything. How did this come to be, though? How did it come to be that such a toxic ingredient has such a massive industry and is so frequently utilized in our foods? Well, let's dive into canola oil specifically and see how exactly it came to be. Well, firstly, the name canola is actually just an acronym that can give us clues on its history. The acronym canola stands for Canadian Oil Low Acid. How does this name relate to its actual history, though? Well, like I stated on earlier, canola oil is derived from the seeds of the rape plant. The production of such oil was actually originally developed during World War II. The oil itself was actually used to lubricate the United States battleships and its steam engines. The oil sticks to the wet metal of the machines, preventing all the water in the ocean from rusting the ship's parts. Okay, so our original use for it was just machine lubricant. Problem was, though, that we didn't really produce enough of the oil to actually lubricate all the parts of the ships that would get wet. So what did the US government do? Basically, they asked the Canadian government to use its resources to increase their production of the rapeseed oil in order to help with the war effort. And so they did. However, after World War II ended, the demand for this rapeseed oil basically plummeted because there really wasn't any use for it. Canada was like, what the fuck? Because they had already used so many resources to produce all this oil. So, what were they thinking as a solution? What if we used it as a cooking oil and fed it to humans? Let's just genetically modify all of the oil so we can lower the amount of acid within it, which is toxic for humans. And as such, canola oil was born. What was once used as machine lubricant is now one of the most highly consumed oils, let alone food ingredients, in the entire United States. Okay, take a step back here. In Canada's position, they had devoted lots of money, time, and resources to producing this oil. And then, after the war, they weren't getting as much return on their investment as they initially were. So they needed some kind of strategy to recover their investment. And what they did was convert it into canola oil. Now keep in mind, the raw rapeseed oil that was used as machine lubricant is pretty much deadly due to its amount of naturally occurring acids. So you would think the people who had a say in the matter would likely consider that before deciding to transform the oil into a food. But instead of looking at the possible health risks that may ensue as a result of people consuming this toxic oil, they valued the opportunity of profit over the possibility of causing mass cardiovascular dysfunction, which is pretty much what's happening today. Now, could you say they were wrong? Because perhaps they were right. Maybe if they hadn't started selling canola oil to Americans, the expenditure of their investment into the production of the oil would have caused them to lose the funding for other parts of their country. Although, from the angle of human nutrition, was the amount of resources that Canada would have lost really worth creating something that would ultimately become a huge benefactor of chronic health disease in the modern world? It's not like they knew the full extent of what their creation would become. But even then, does this make them inherently wrong? That's a lot to think about. On the topic of food, though, let's look at another subject. Milk. Milk. Pretty simple, right? I mean, everyone's drank milk before, right? Well, what if I were to tell you that you have actually probably never drank milk before in your life? All of this liquid contained in cartons that you thought was milk was literally a white lie. How so, you ask? Well, take a look at what happens to it before it reaches the carton. Once it's milked from the cow and brought to the factory, it runs through a process known as pasteurization, which is when the milk is heated in a tank at very high temperatures. And milk that is not pasteurized is actually banned in most parts of the United States. Now, supposedly, the milk going through this process is in order to kill harmful pathogens within the milk. The problem with this, though, is that it also kills all of the other beneficial compounds and enzymes that are naturally occurring in the milk.
It doesn't look very controversial until you start asking about what happened to it before it arrived in this glass. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration says that for safety reasons, milk needs to be pasteurized, heated to at least 160 degrees. Milk not pasteurized is known as raw milk, which the FDA says can harbor dangerous microorganisms. But now pasteurization is increasingly under attack.
That makes the milk, quote, safe to drink, but it doesn't make it healthy to drink.
Ron Schmidt is an author and a naturopathic physician who's an expert on this topic.
Pasteurization heats the milk to at least 160 degrees or so, even higher for ultra-pasteurized. And in the process, it kills harmful bacteria. It also kills all of the beneficial bacteria that make fresh food what human beings thrive upon. So you wind up with a dead food.
What's the real purpose of this process then? I mean, if it's killing all of the beneficial life that is naturally occurring within milk that comes from a mammal, then clearly, just like with the seed oils, the thing being valued in question is not human health when it comes to pasteurizing the milk. On the contrary, though, look at real milk, the pure, raw milk that comes straight from nature. It's quite literally the quintessential, most nourishing, nutrient-rich aspect of the human diet. Such a vital, living substance. I mean, it is so rich with probiotics, enzymes, and other beneficial nutrients. And all of these nutritional aspects of it, they literally function in ways that complement their very purpose. For example, in the context of the human body, probiotics and enzymes in raw milk literally are utilized by our organs to break down the contents of the milk itself and feed all of its nutrients to us automatically. It pretty much makes it so our organs don't have to do as much work to absorb all of the nutrients. This is also why milk is naturally given to babies, not only human babies, but all mammals. Think about it. If milk is literally self-digesting and it can automatically feed the nutrients to a mammal, then it's absolutely the most perfect thing to feed a baby mammal whose digestive system isn't even fully developed yet. So, the baby's little organs can absorb all of the nutrients very easily, but at the same time, the milk's probiotics literally immunify the baby's gut so that it can digest more solid foods in the future. I mean, it's almost like it was nature's intention for us to drink the raw milk from these animals and give it to our young ones. So then, how come today it's outlawed and this fake sugar water is what people regard as milk? Well, everything happens for a reason. What exactly do I mean by this? Some people might call this the butterfly effect, but everything that happens seems to have a kind of intention. For example, just like the raw milk, there are many functions of nature which seem to intentionally, positively serve the human race. For example, why do you think fruit is so colorful as compared to the rest of the tree that the fruit might be growing on? Well, it's because as humans, our eyes subconsciously seek very colorful things. So think about it like this. If you wanted to feed a human something that is full of beneficial vitamins, minerals, healthy fibers, what would you make? Well, you'd make something sweet with a healthy sugar like fructose so that the human eating it would have more of an incentive to eat more of it, since any kind of sugar releases dopamine within the human brain. Then you'd give it an easy to digest, chewy texture, and you'd give it a bright red color so that humans could easily identify it. And so, you have an apple. That's just one example though. But whatever nature is, it constructed things like this intentionally out of love and consideration for humans and how their bodies and minds work. So, how does this relate back to raw milk and why it's being so sterilized today? Well, let's look at the history of it. Civilizations thrived off of raw milk for basically millennia, until, during the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s, farmers had started constructing swill dairies, which were basically cramped indoor farms built next to alcohol distilleries. And swill itself is a name for the nasty leftover byproduct of the whiskey grains used in the distillery. And pretty much this swill is what was actually being fed to the cows. So you can imagine what kind of bizarre effects this had on the milk being produced. As a result, all of the people who drank the milk from distilleries got madly sick, and a lot of people actually died from it. So take a step back and look what really happened here. The owners of these distilleries wanted to profit from all the leftover swill they had, So they convinced the farmers to buy it from them and create these swill farms. Yet they overlooked nature by doing so. Cows want to eat grass and graze the land. This is all part of the process for the milk to be pure. But they just stuck with their intention of profiting and didn't care to consider the reality of what they were actually doing. They took something which was intended to provide life and nourishment, and due to valuing their profits so obsessively, they sacrificed the very things which made the milk a positive part of the human diet, and ultimately it caused death among the people that they sold it to. From the perspective of the farmers, they likely had thought what they were doing was a good thing. Maybe they valued money so much because they had certain desires to use it for other beneficial things, or maybe just supporting their families. That doesn't excuse the way they went about selling the milk, though. Luckily, people found out what was happening, and they rioted to shut down the swill farm successfully. After the fact, I can only presume the farmers went back to a more natural way of producing milk on their farms. People were selling it the old-fashioned way, and people were thriving off of raw milk once again. It was around this time, though, which was the 1930s, when many scientific advances were being made, including the discovery of pasteurization. So, inevitably, experiments were done to pasteurize raw milk, and these experiments were shown to kill all of the bacteria within it. When this was discovered, a familiar name took this information and used it for something diabolical. What name am I referring to? None other than John D. Rockefeller, the man himself who said, "I do not want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." He is the reason this life-giving part of nature is now just given to us as dead sugar water. In 1933, he patented some of the first machinery that would be used to industrially pasteurize and process large quantities of milk. He was also able to pass many laws that required those who sold dairy to use this machinery, which ultimately ended up ruining the livelihoods of thousands of small farmers who could not afford this expensive machinery for their farms. Many ended up having to sell off their cattle to the larger dairy producers, who used them to push out more and more of this dead food onto our people. Now, a man as intelligent and as scheming and powerful as Rockefeller wouldn't just do such a thing out of happenstance. There seems to be a variety of incentives to selling milk this way. They are much more sinister than the simple greed, like that of the swill farmers I just touched on. Try to fathom this plan. Let's take a natural superfood that has been a crucial part of human vitality for thousands of years. Then, let's sterilize it and kill all of the nourishing, living probiotics and enzymes within it. And let's instate a law to enforce that every single bit of milk from every single cow must be put through this process in order to legally be distributed in the United States of America. And then John had another idea, and he said, hey, the pasteurization process, in killing all of the active enzymes within the milk, it's also killing one very crucial enzyme, which is the lactase enzyme. As you guys may know, the main component of milk is lactose. Lactose is a sugar, and in combination with the lactase enzyme, this sugar is converted to natural energy within the human body. However, if there is no lactase enzyme within the milk, then the lactose sugars kind of just help to create fat cells throughout the human body. It doesn't really do anything beneficial, actually. Just having the pure lactose can only cause problems. John knew about this, but he had a reason for it, since on top of the dairy industry, he also has powers of the entire pharmaceutical industry. So what did he do? He formulated the idea of lactose intolerance, and this is what most people that consume dairy think they have today. Because Mr. Rockefeller made sure that this idea was pushed onto all the upcoming pharmaceutical and nutritional education systems. But why, John? Why give these people the idea that lactose is bad for them instead of telling them the truth, that they're just deficient in the lactase enzyme that they need to break down the lactose, and that you took it away from them by pasteurizing the milk? Oh, well, of course. if you feed them the lie that their body can't handle lactose, then you can sell them a pill that actually does contain the lactase enzyme and market it as something that they need to buy in order to consume your dead sugary lactose. Let's call it Lactaid.
Lactaid is 100% real milk, just without the lactose, so you can enjoy it even if you're sensitive. Yet some people say Lactaid isn't real milk. I guess all those cows must actually be big dogs. That's it.
Even today, not everyone is so blindsided to the truth. But it's funny because even such people have to maneuver their way around the laws on our nutrition that are still in place today. Exhibit A being raw farm. The laws on raw milk are definitely being more loosened in the modern age. Raw farm is a perfect representation of this, being the largest patented raw dairy brand in the US. They were able to do so by raw dairy sale laws under specific state jurisdictions. So, in some states they can directly sell raw dairy to consumers, but in other states they can't. Here's what's really interesting though. In all 50 states, the sale of raw milk to pets is perfectly legal. And it's kind of a legal loophole, but Raw Farm, as a result, also puts some of their raw milk in a different carton that says it's for your pet. This way you can enjoy drinking a staple of nature without having to worry about the FDA busting down your door. And if you want, your pet can enjoy it too. I live in one of these pet-only states, so my first experience with raw milk was actually with this exact product. Specifically, it was fermented milk known as kefir, which is a whole nother nutritional spectacle of nature. When I drank this raw pet kefir for the first time, it was honestly one of the most delicious things I'd ever had. I could almost feel it healing my stomach, which has had years of garbage processed food intake. So I drank more of it, and more of it, and more of it, until I actually threw up from it. What is kefir exactly? Well, it originates from thousands of years of farmers who simply collected milk with buckets by hand. When they drank the milk from the bucket, there would still be leftover residues of the previous milk within it. And when the farmers left the dirty bucket outside all night, nature would do its work, and the local cultures and bacteria would start gathering up in the bucket so that any more milk that was within it would ferment. And this is pretty much all that kefir is. It's just a conglomeration of probiotic bacteria in the dairy, kind of like yogurt, but even more rich in nutrients. So you can imagine, the first time a person introduces this raw superfood into their gut in a very large amount, after being deprived of nutrients their whole life from impure foods, the body has a pretty visceral reaction to it, such as the vomiting that I experienced. Now, some people might have the mindset that says, hey, if you drank something that made you vomit due to its bacteria, clearly it made you sick and you should never drink it again. Why do people think this way though? Maybe it's because we're so commonly fed these narratives like, oh, all germs and bacteria are horrible for us, even if it is natural. But that's just not true. I mean, yeah, when I drank a ton of the kefir and threw up because of it, that's because I never had it before. My body wasn't accustomed to it. Once I did throw up, I actually had 4 more cartons of it after the fact. And when I drank them, no problems. Actually, I felt a lot better after drinking them. But like, nowadays it's so sad. I mean, we're fed these ideas that, oh, all bacteria and germs are horrible. They make you sick and they need to be demolished. I mean, the word germ literally translates back to what? I think it's life. Like the word germ translates to life. But if you ask anyone in the modern age what a germ is, they'll tell you it's this parasitic, life-sucking entity. And now, because of the way that these ideas have been proposed to us as a society, So many people are fixated on what external factors they need in order to heal themselves and heal these germs, like medications and vaccines, supplements, and such, that they don't even know how powerful the human body is in terms of healing itself. And this goes way beyond my gut just healing itself from the bacteria from the kefir. I mean, people don't even know how powerful the human body is at healing itself from its environment as well. Think about it. The whole premise of something like a vaccine is to prepare your immune system for an illness by injecting a synthetic replica of such an illness directly into your bloodstream. And this pretty much forces your body to adopt completely artificial pathogenic defense systems based on the contents of the vaccine. Can't you see how ironic this is? By injecting the vaccine, it prevents the person's body from adapting on its own to create an immune defense system that actually makes sense in the context of the individual's biology and strengthens their body's ability to fight off these toxins without needing any external affectation like a vaccine. Because the truth is, our true healing will come from within our own DNA. This is the same place it has come from since the beginning of our very nature. Do you really think humans got this far by getting rid of all the bacteria that surrounds us? No, our bodies adapted to it. By killing these things, it's in the mindset that nature is somehow out to get us. I mean, where do you think we came from? Nature, this life force which has birthed all the germs and natural bacteria, is the same life force which has birthed every one of us. The natural yet supernatural power of love, abundance, which makes up our very being. The same love which has provided us with the complex network of nerves, neurotransmitters, and countless other perfectly constructed bodily systems that make us able to physically and psychologically adapt and thrive in any natural environment, such as subconsciously directing our focus towards the most beneficial foods of our nature, using colors that us humans would recognize as some life-providing source of energy. Earlier I touched on the apple, but an even better example is red meat, which is filled with the blood of the mammal it came from. The unconscious part of us instantly makes this kind of association with the blood and the meat, telling our brain that it's full of vital energies for us. This is the same life force that also gave us a homeostatic connection with the literal earth itself, so that when we ground ourselves to the earth, our entire body can reap the benefits of the electrons flowing through us.
The main concept behind grounding is that you're transferring electrons from the earth to your body. The reason why this is beneficial is because those electrons can act in your body in different ways, and most often they produce a reduction reaction. Now, if you guys are familiar with the term oxidative stress, you may have heard this before. This is the cause for a lot of different problems within your body, and a reduction reaction is basically reducing oxidative stress or going in the opposite direction. A reduction reaction is taking free radicals within your body, adding an electron to that molecule and stabilizing that molecule so it can no longer cause damage to other cells. So there's a ton of different benefits from grounding. I'm going to show you guys.
So the oxidative stress that you might deal with as a result of consuming seed oils is a result of electrons being lost from your cells. That's what oxidation is. And so this can also be combated by the gain of electrons to your cells through grounding onto the earth. Back to the bigger picture though, if nature is able to plan such elaborate systems of information in relation to the human psyche and its physical form, then also the humans themselves are intelligent enough to take inspiration from nature's genius and use it in their own devices. For example, an apple may be red, but you know what else is? A Coca-Cola and a Kit Kat bar. And these color choices by people who distribute these products are absolutely intentional. The same way that nature is intentional in making the apple a bright red so that it's easily identifiable by humans. Same applies to these processed foods. Both of these kinds of foods are high in sugar content as well. So think about it. If our brain, in the context of surviving in nature, subconsciously sees the color red and associates it with sugar, then it's going to do the same thing with the sugary candy and the sugary drink. So what's the difference? Well, the way nature intended, an apple is red and easily identifiable to humans because the sugar content is used as an incentive for humans to eat it so that the humans can absorb the nutrients within the apple. Contrarily, with the Kit Kat bar or the Coca-Cola, the same kind of subconscious signaling is being used, except the difference is there are no beneficial nutrients in a Kit Kat bar or a Coca-Cola. Actually, quite the opposite. Both of these things are extremely unhealthy for humans. So with these kind of foods, the intention behind them is to create an illusion that your body is being properly satiated by associating it with a bright color and sugar. Because our natural brains are accustomed to being satiated by fruit, which are also brightly colored and full of sugar. And either way, whether in the fructose of something like an apple or the high fructose corn syrup found in Coke, or maybe the refined sucrose in a Kit Kat, either way, it's giving your brain a dopamine signal that you're getting the proper nutrients, when with the processed food you're not. I got sidetracked again. To backtrack though, humans absolutely manipulate these same aspects of our human nature. Like the example that I just presented. They want you to think that if you eat this candy or you drink this sugary soda, that it's gonna give you the same nutrients as eating something like fruit. Because your brain is getting the signal that you're getting sugar, and our brain naturally associates this signal with the nutrients that come with fruit. Except because you're not getting the nutrients with the processed sugars, you're going to crave more and more and more of that processed sugar because you're not actually getting the nutrients. And so that's really what leads to this obesity and diabetes, honestly. So would it really be too far-fetched to say that the companies who make these products are literally intending for you to consume them consistently and get sick because of it? To literally crave it because of its sugar and not get satisfied when you have it? So you buy more and more of it, so they get richer and richer, and you get sicker and sicker? It's honestly genius, but it's also fucking wrong. And when it comes to modern food, there's so many other ill-intended things like this. Things that cause addiction, like I just said. I mean, why do you think people love fast food so much? It's not like something like a burger is inherently unhealthy. But if you look at somewhere like McDonald's, people seem to be addicted to the food. It's because the combination of ingredients in the food are actually designed to make people addicted to it. For example, every single bun that you get on every single sandwich at McDonald's contains 4 different kinds of the seed oils I was touching on earlier. And the omega-6 fatty acids that I described earlier in the oils are actually interpreted by your brain in a very similar way to the omega-3 fatty acids that are contained in the actual burger meat. Because when you eat something like a Big Mac from McDonald's, and you get all of these omega-6 fatty acids, which are way more than the actual omega-3s in the burger, since the patty's pretty much 10% of the whole thing. It's kind of like all the oils in the burger are tricking your brain into thinking that you're getting more meat from the burger than there actually is, and thus more nutrients from the burger than there actually are. Way more than there actually are. But because your brain is getting the signal that you're getting these nutrients, but you're not, it makes your brain literally crave more and more of it, just like with processed sugars. So in essence, it's pretty much designed to be an addictive food.
Like you're getting a ton of energy, the wrong type of energy at that, and very little nutrients. And so your body's just gonna, it's only gonna be satiated if you get enough nutrients and enough energy. If you're just getting one of those, you're gonna keep eating. And so that's one issue. Another issue is that these oils, these fatty acids are very unstable because they have double bonds. Which make them unstable. They're not saturated with hydrogens, which would give them all single bonds to the carbons. And so when they're unsaturated like that, they're more likely to get damaged, whether that's from heat or light or just metabolism within the body. And so when we eat these, we end up getting we get high levels of inflammation and oxidative stress because these fats will get damaged very easily when we eat these. And so eating these oils definitely drives inflammation and oxidative stress to very high levels because these oils are so unstable and they cause all kinds of damage when they get into our body.
That's really something to think about, isn't it? What else is there, though? What's another way that people in power use their resources to manipulate the human brain like this? Well, there are almost infinite things that this question can apply to. Modern media, propaganda, even more nuances with food, the literal structure of how cities and buildings are constructed. I mean, really think of this. When we're in cities, we are supposed to walk down sidewalks. The more you walk down it, the more your brain gets accustomed to walking in a straight linear path that doesn't leave any room for discovery or exploration. And these sidewalks lead to buildings that are set in stone, square, and rigid. When we're in this big city environment, it literally activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which puts us in a fight or flight mode. Is it any wonder that people who go about their lives in a crowded city every day feel so stressed all the time? What else is there? The distractions of political and cultural events, which most of the time are either fabricated or exaggerated happenings in the lives of people who are so high in their matrix of social status that they're desensitized to most genuine interactions and livelihoods of other people in the world. Meanwhile, these kinds of things are used to hide the immoral doings of our power systems from the media. The list goes on, but who's really to blame? I mean, sure, people like Rockefeller and now a plethora of other people today are indirectly causing so much suffering among people in favor of their ambitions and the things they've solidified in this world. But look at these things from every perspective. Here's an example. The largest manufacturing groups for smartphones are literally causing mass slave labor and conflicts in Congo, forcing exiles to mine certain minerals that need to be used in the manufacturing of cell phones. Now, obviously, if you were to hear about this, you would think, yeah, this is a fucking horrible thing that's happening in the world. But at the same time, think of it this way. Would any of us even have access to the information of what's happening if we didn't actually have the smartphones that we have? It's so ironic. The only reason that we're able to even spread the information about this injustice that's happening in order to try and make a difference on it is through the electronic network that such an injustice is helping us to supply by communicating about it on our smartphones. And with this line of thinking, you have to realize many things that seem directly contrary can be true at once. It's true that people are risking their lives and crawling into these mines just to get these minerals so they can sell them and make enough money to survive where they live. It's absolutely true. Also, it's true that these minerals make up the hardware in these devices that are a crucial part of our modern communication. And it is through this communication, and only through this communication, that we were able to even spread the information about what's happening to obtain these minerals. Back to the topic of food, though, there are many ways that I could relate this same concept. For example, I don't believe anyone should have to be exposed to these ultra-processed conglomerations that we stuff into our pie holes today. In terms of nutrition, we seem to have everything that we would ever need in nature. Healthy sugars and carbohydrates from things like fruits, honey, maple syrup. It's not even including all the natural carbohydrate sources that aren't as nutrient-rich as things like fruit. And not to mention, it's not even a question that the only reason humanity has survived as long as it has is due to all the high-quality animal foods which we have thrived on as a species. Dairy products such as raw milk, cheese, kefir, and saturated animal fats like butter. Of course, the staple of meat and organs, which can absolutely be considered the most nutrient-dense superfoods on the planet. Maybe in a perfect world, this way of valuing nature and what it has to offer us would have continued with the span of human evolution. But would that really be a perfect world? There are many other perspectives to consider. While it might seem true that a more pure version of nature would have everything we need, it is and was only by our own human innovation that we were able to actually reap the benefits of such things in nature. Such as humans building farms, curdling cheese, cooking our meats, and so on. The more we innovated, the more we discovered that we were able to achieve when we experimented with the edible parts of nature and the things that we could manipulate and improve. And the more we did so, the less natural, you could say, our foods and our livelihoods became. This really is not necessarily a bad thing, though, in some regards. In the conversations I have had with people on this topic, I've often been proposed the idea that people just got bored of eating the same foods despite the vast variety of food sources that come from nature. And this does make sense when you consider that some of the first civilizations were only founded and built upon in a certain location and prioritized a system and diet that matched whatever lifestyle they had adopted. As time went on, each civilization became more sophisticated with the innovations they made on their diets. And this is when many cultures began to view their production of food as a creative art of sorts, rather than a simple provision of nourishment from the natural world. Now, does this mean by doing so that we are actually defying nature and what it had intended for us to eat? You could absolutely make such an argument, but then in a way, that would denote every single creative innovation upon nature in all of human history. I mean, no matter what, we are a part of nature. Does this mean our effect upon the world around us is just as natural as the world itself which we were born into? If you look at the intention of nature and how perfectly it complements us humans, then you begin to realize that every single facet of nature is for a reason. And for the most part, these reasons are to benefit the human race, such as the examples that I listed earlier. But with this line of thinking, you also realize everything happens for a reason, even all of humanity's own actions on nature and their fellow human. You see, it's all based on perception. Everything we do is based on our perceptions. If you assume only one perception on anything in life, then you could be missing information, context, or resources that could help you see the bigger picture, and maybe a completely different perspective that would make a lot more sense to you. Here's one. Nature gave us trees, and in conjunction with the sun, trees photosynthesize to create oxygen for humans to breathe. But then us humans started chopping down all the trees. Who are we to defy nature in such a way after it gave us something so beneficial? Humans are such arrogant creatures. That's one way of looking at it. But consider the perspective of the humans. The reason they were chopping down the trees wasn't to try and rid the environment of oxygen. Why would they do that? They were doing it because they needed the wood, so they could build things like bonfires or shelters for themselves, and the function of these things was to protect themselves from some of the harsh conditions and the dangerous other species that might try and hunt them. And these species are part of the same nature that gave us the trees. So the question isn't necessarily what was meant for us or how we were supposed to live, because then you would question every instance of humans affecting their environment that has ever happened. But if you look at each of these human affectations from every angle of their circumstances, you'll start to see that every single one was the best course of action based on the perspective that the given humans chose to have in their situation. Here's a really big way that I can show you what I mean. In our modern society, we seem to be born into so many possible things which affect our neurochemistry in ways that are hard to even fathom. It absolutely depends on your environment, though, and the ways that you personally interpret it. You could be born into the concrete jungle, being misled by people and agendas who have such warped expectations of humans, and you could long for a more simple and pure way of life, willing to sacrifice the synthesized dopamine that you may be exposed to each day. Or you could be born into a more simple and natural way of life, but your curiosity may lead you to want something more stimulating, or fulfilling rather. With this in mind, you can deduct that almost every single rational decision made by humans is made with the belief that such a decision will improve the quality of their life, regardless of whether or not this may be true. What's a way that I can articulate this kind of idea? If you exercise your body and practice resistance training to stimulate muscle growth, then this will improve the quality of your life. Not only will endorphins be produced in your body and released in your brain after hitting a certain point, but also, as you do it consistently, you will obviously stimulate muscle growth, strengthening your body and making it more useful for certain tasks, which require the use of certain muscles. At the same time, though, you could take on this perspective. If I don't exercise my body, I won't have to deal with the temporary pain that comes with exerting my energy upon heavy weights or upon having to run, sprint, or some other kind of cardiovascular activity. And me not having to deal with this pain is going to improve my life in the short term, that is. You see how both decisions improve upon the person's life in one way or another? Let's look at a more nuanced dilemma. Say you own an online business where you sell some kind of merchandise, and you just realized there's some orders on your website that you have to fulfill, but you're not currently at your computer. You're hanging out with some friends at this cafe. But you have a car, your place is 5 minutes away, and you could totally put off the orders for later, but you know the sooner you get it done, the better. Now, this is your first time running this kind of business. You have very little experience, but one of your friends here is a multi-millionaire who sells his own merchandise. You haven't told him what you're doing yet, but you know for a fact that if you communicate with him and articulate what it is you're trying to accomplish, then you could get some advice that could seriously take your business to the next level. Also, your friend here, this is the last time you might see him for a while. He's taking a trip to Bali for a vacation. Now, here's the dilemma. Do you say goodbye to your friends and rush home to make sure that these orders get fulfilled before it's too late? Or do you take the chance to really connect and network with your friend so that you can gain some valuable information and possibly build a mentorship between you two, risking the possibility of losing money on the orders that you had neglected as a result? Now I know this is very oddly specific, however, the same question still stands. which one of these options is ultimately going to improve your life more? And the answer can absolutely be both. It's simply a game of pick and choose. What do you value more, the security or the opportunity? Want to go even deeper? Well, consider this. The decisions we make are not only those which are made in the context of our physical activities or our humanistic judgments upon our environments and our society, but also the very microscopic cells and entities and particles which altogether make up our very being also make their own judgments and decisions. They are a part of us, and so they make decisions in conjunction with our physical and psychological needs in response to our environment and the decisions and actions which we consciously make upon it. Now, you might have no idea what I'm talking about, but this is referred to as our microbiome, and you can think of it as the entire kingdom of living organisms which make up the castle of our very being. And obviously it responds very sensitively to changes made in our environment. This includes changes which are made to us psychologically as well. And this is the kind of thing that the powers of our society manipulate. If you can instill any kind of psychological change to a human, then in turn the entire microbiome of the human, which includes its neurological aspects, will actually choose a way to adapt. It can either reject such a psychological change and regress it into the unconscious with the hopes that it's forgotten about, or it can accept the change and adopt it in a way which is the most optimal in consideration with other aspects of the human's life that the change relates to. However, this isn't always 100% controllable in every situation for every human. In certain circumstances, different environmental and sociological factors can make it so a human is almost forced to implement a certain psychological change into their belief system. And like anything, this can definitely be either positive or negative. A positive connotation of this could be like someone who feels that they are weak physically, eats junk food, doesn't exercise, but their friends are quite healthy in that regard, and they invite him to the gym. He struggles to lift the weights, but his friends shout at him not to give up. He feels so pressured, but he realizes his friends want the same thing for him as he does. With both the physical and mental stress of his predicament, in conjunction with the desires that he has, his belief systems begin to change, and as time goes on, he continues to train with his friends and train his mind to break his previous habits that had held him back. Now, that is a really cool narrative, but there are also negative psychological changes that could seem to happen forcefully due to factors of the environment. And to get back to my main point, these kind of changes are what seem to happen to us in the modern day. And this runs much deeper than just changing our habits. Like I said, when a human accepts an idea or a concept which causes a psychological change in them, this change also takes an effect upon the rest of the human's physiology. And depending on the nature of the change, the human will feel the need to spread this information to other humans. And this can manifest through many different forms of information, not just verbal. For example, let's say you're watching TV, and suddenly you see a scary message that Bigfoot has been spotted in your area. If you let that instill fear in you, then that fear is going to become very apparent to your environment, including whoever you're living with. Because you might run over to them and tell them that Bigfoot is nearby and we need to barricade all the doors. But if you approach them instead by saying, check it out, they found Bigfoot, they would likely take up the same attitude as you and laugh it off. This is because when you have some kind of intense psychological feeling that gets reinforced by external information, your brain relays such a feeling to the rest of your nervous system, and so your cells begin to excrete exosomes, also known as informational molecules. These molecules are what cause a reaction in the rest of your body to whatever the feeling is that you may be having. This reaction begins internally and begins to influence your entire nervous system. And this can be portrayed outwardly in the form of our body language, the actions we take, the things we say, our tone of voice, and so on. So, whatever information these exosomes contain will be indirectly transmuted to everyone in the environment. And in this case, that fearful fight or flight response that you got from the Bigfoot message would be transmuted to the person you told because your tone of voice and mannerisms communicated to them that they should be as scared as you are. Now, what if you'd seen the message and questioned it with your rational mind instead of just allowing it to scare you to death? Then you'd likely realize that it was just a hoax or a joke. And with that information, you'd subconsciously reinforce the use of your rational mind, since it showed you the actual truth of the situation, instead of letting you be scared of something completely irrational. Then, your brain would automatically communicate this realization to your nervous system, and your cells would still excrete exosomes to the rest of your body, but the information in these exosomes would actually calm you instead of stressing you out. Because now you remembered, hey, Bigfoot isn't fucking real. So, how does this relate to our real world predicament? Well, when the media bombards us with sorts of fear-mongering, which is usually based on heavily biased information, you can start to infer many ways that the people who put out this media try and influence our subconscious, thus the rest of our nervous system, and thus many other aspects of our lives. Sometimes, especially with government-related media, there's an intention behind it to make you think a certain way, and other times it's just a kind of self-expression from the creator of such media. So, even though so much of the media causes people distraction, irrational fears, and obsessions over things that aren't really important to their lives, that's not to say necessarily that the intentions behind it all are malevolent. And that really goes for all of the things that people can deduct conspiracy theories about, like even about the complex transformation of what people call food today, like I've been talking about in this video. Now, like I said, most of what you see in supermarkets is ultra-processed garbage that have more unhealthy effects than most people even have a concept of. But I'm not going to sit here and act like it's all one huge evil plan and everybody in charge of the food industries want to kill you, because it's really not as deep as that. It's more like a lot of people made a lot of mistakes when deciding what kind of regulations should we have on food, what ways can we determine if something is healthy, in what ways can we profit the most off people's hunger, and so on. Like I said, all of these things that people do are in the belief that what they're doing is the right thing, regardless of what position they're in. And this is the undeniable beauty of all humans at all times, because no matter what impact we have on reality, it will be balanced out in one way or another. Is it any wonder that people who do have power over these things and abuse it for the sake of money are actually some of the most unhappy people on Earth? It's because the effect they have in the world will always come back to them. The same can be said for the people who are the most generous in spirit, pouring their heart out for those in need, even if they themselves are undergoing the most hardship. We will all receive from the universe what we truly need.